Well, I think every song has got a story behind it. It's got a father and a mother. Schubert provided half of the song in the sense that he wrote the music, and of course is justly celebrated for that. But he had a response to words which was quite extraordinary. And it's the way that the interaction between words and music, and which in a sense gives the song its own life, takes place, that interests me. Joseph von Spahn once wrote very perspicaciously that Schubert writes a poem on the poem. So actually it's like he is trying to say that the song is in fact a commentary on the poem. And how and why it is a commentary in detail is what really interests me. Schubert is by nature discreet, but he's far more discreet than most other people of his period, and there's a side of him that is deliberately, I think, doesn't allow people to know him as deeply as we would wish, because we love him so much and we're so curious about him and we actually find him such a fascinating composer. But the whole sexuality question of Schubert is still, for me, a very open question. I mean, there are all sorts of reasons to suppose one thing and other reasons to suppose another. And in the end, he contains those type of multitudes that Whitman spoke of. I'm quite happy for him to remain as mystically unknowable as some of his greatest musical achievements. Well, I think that it's the best of him. I mean, it's the most extraordinarily individual contribution made to the history of music. It's the most extraordinary contribution made to the art of Vienna. Of course, he comes from Mozart and from Gluck and from Beethoven, and he wrote things symphonically and in chamber music worthy of those great masters, Beethoven and Mozart. But in Lieder, this is a new opening, a new extraordinary something. And I think if you were to really play Schubert's piano music or chamber music without actually knowing some of the greater Lieder, you'd be missing that element of understanding that makes him who he is. What I've hoped is to write an interesting enough essay on each song so that it can be taken out of context and read with a certain amount of pleasure in its own right, so that you're not expected to read the book cover to cover, and you're not expected to have necessarily a huge amount of information from an article that is, 30 pages earlier in the book. It's actually meant to be dipped into because nobody can cover to cover read about all the Schubert songs. Sometimes I discuss the poetry first, sometimes the music first, sometimes the history first. It's just how the song appeared to me. So in a sense, it isn't as organized as let's first deal with the poem, then deal with the music, which is all very well in theory. But to a certain extent, I'm hoping that it's a comfortable enough experience to read about a song that interests the person who takes the book off the shelf, to read about it and for them to carry away an impression of the music and the words. They'll have the text and translation, they'll have an incipit, which actually gives a bit of the music, the publishing information, and at the end of every article, tabular information about additions, dedications, further settings of the same text, and so on. Being a performer means that I've been in the trenches, as it were, up at the front, on the platform, held the music in my hands, felt it under my fingers, made it work as well as I can for certain singers. It doesn't necessarily give the viewpoints that a person whose whole and entire job it is to regard music from a bird's eye view element. Maybe the one criticism is that we are too focused on the near aspect of the effect the music makes, what it says to us, what it speaks to us. It's somebody else's job to see big historical trends of the composer over a long period, and there have been many people who've done that. But I know it hands-on. I mean, that's the excuse. It's not a theoretical thing for me. I've seen a lot of writing where people have been assigned writing, about the songs, and it's quite clear that they've looked at it on the paper, but they've never played it. The wonderful thing about Richard Capel's 1928 book on Schubert songs is that he was a critic of the Telegraph, but he obviously took the great editions of Mandachevsky, which was the old complete edition on the shelf over there, and actually read through in his own way every one in the absence of gramophone recordings. And, you know, that makes a difference. It's not just a question of hearing them on a gramophone, but actually feeling them in the fingers.